Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Toddler Years. My name is Susan Matthews, and I'll be your moderator. I'm excited to be hosting this session today. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Joy Wishton. Joy is a licensed professional counselor serving as an infant and early childhood specialist with the Launch Together initiative. Joy has provided clinical services to children and families and consultation services to education providers in a school-based setting with an emphasis on child development, social emotional growth, parenting and caregiving support, attachment, and the impact of trauma and toxic stress. Joy is passionate about supporting families and caregivers through strengthening of and connection to community providers. Today, Joy is going to be talking about how parents play a critical role from nurturing an infant to helping a 2-year-old deal with limits and temper tantrums. I think I could use some of that too. You will learn more about the physical and emotional development patterns in this stage of your child's life. As a reminder, today's presentation, along with all of the other presentations from the conference, will be available on demand after the live session for the next 30 days. But before I hand the mic over to Joy, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about the presentation and the Helping Kids Thrive conference. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors and partners who have helped make this event possible today. It is a true community effort to put this together. Thank you to Jeffco Public Schools, Rotary Club of Golden, Delta Dental, Westminster Medical Clinic, Source Communication, and Jeffco PTA for your support. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to send it through the Q&A tab at the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session, but don't worry, if we don't get to your question, or if you'd like to ask additional questions, we encourage you to attend our Q&A session with our speakers from 8:30 to 9 p.m. tonight. Also, if you're experiencing technical difficulties, please email us at webmaster@jcmh.org and we'll be available to help. I'll also put that link in the chat. And finally, at the end of the presentation, please fill out the session evaluation by clicking the link that I'll be putting in the chat later. Your feedback is important and helps us plan for future conferences. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Joy. Joy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Susan. Hi there. I wish I could say it's so nice to see you. This platform is totally new for me, so we will be exploring it together. We're actually, for our time together tonight, because even though I can't really see you and you may not be able to verbally interact with me, please use that Q&A button as much as possible. I love for things to be as integrated in that engagement as much as we can. In the chat box, I'm going to put in a website, and on your smart device, I'm going to ask that you go to this website, zeedings.com/joyw. And I'm going to share my screen. We're going to participate in this learning experience together. So let me share this. And as you go, on your smart device, you'll be able to follow along what I'm sharing on the screen, but this just has a little opportunity for you to fill in a few questions, respond to a couple polls in some live time. And again, if you have questions that I'm not answering, please feel free to write them in the Q&A chat box. And I already told Susan to just interrupt me and ask the questions as we go in live time. That way we don't need to wait till the end. We can do it as the questions come up. All right, so hopefully if you're here, it's because you want to talk about the toddler years. And for that, I first want to do just a little check-in. So on your smart device right now, will you just take a minute and type in the ages of your children? Great, 11 months. We'll give it just a minute. Susan, can you see my participants and let me know if I'm waiting for any other friends to answer?
Yeah, we have a 0 to 2-year-olds listed in the chat right now.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, perfect. So right at that toddler age. Okay, so next one on the Zeetings or in the chat, will you just give us a few words to describe your toddler? Maybe a couple words that describe their personality or their temperament, or maybe some of the challenges of raising a toddler. And Susan, as they come in, will you read them out?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a 16-month listed. So I think that was to your first question.
Thank you. Okay, beautiful. So a few words that are popping up on our screen: smiley and mercurial. Nice words. We'll give some time to let you other parents keep on writing. How else would you describe your toddler?
I don't have any. Oh, busy. Nice.
Great word, busy. I think that's a perfect description of most toddlers. Okay, I'm going to keep going along, but feel free to keep using that chat to add in.
Curious as well.
Curious, great, thank you. Yeah, smiley, busy, curious, mercurial. Fantastic.
Stubborn.
So, stubborn. I was waiting for a few of those. Awesome. Okay, so we're holding those personality types in mind, those kind of traits of their behavior, and maybe you notice how their curiosity plays a factor in their behavior, or their stubbornness in following directions. So hopefully that will go with our goals for tonight, which I want to cover just some basic child development. So like a typically developing child, what are some crucial developmental milestones for a toddler? We also want to look at what behaviors should we expect if toddlers are invalidated or if they're emotionally dismissed. We also want to look at some strategies to prevent those behaviors and also repair if an explosion like that should happen. And of course, very important, we want to talk about you and how you care for yourself so that you're able to address the needs of your toddler. I'm curious, I'll leave this up for a minute. If you will, go ahead and write in the chat if there's anything else that maybe isn't included in these goals that you want to make sure that we have time to touch on. We'll give just a minute if you need to fill something in.
Yeah, I think we're probably good.
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So Alicia Lieberman, who she's called the Toddler Whisperer, actually. She is an early childhood mental health specialist and a social worker, and she does lots of beautiful research into kind of the inner workings of young children. She wrote this book called The Emotional Life of the Toddler, which I highly recommend to all parents. And she says the most important emotional accomplishment of the toddler years is reconciling the urge to become competent and self-reliant with the longing for parental love and protection. And I think that these two parts really beautifully sum up the inner workings and the challenge and sometimes the conflict going on inside of a toddler's brain. So when we think about what that means, a toddler really has this ongoing need to be in frequent contact with their caregivers. And they also have this ongoing need to have this new sense of autonomy and independence. So they want to be near you and they also want to do their own thing. And for us as adults, sometimes it just doesn't make sense when or why they're doing this. Some of the things that can help us understand when they get to that toddler stage is when really they're starting to be able to walk by themselves and you notice that their language is starting to develop. So while there can be, like the 2 and 3-year-olds or 18 months as far as like an age bracket, really if you're looking at their skills, when they can walk alone or start to, and their language starts to develop is when they start to turn in their brain into that toddler age. With development, with physical development, we also have emotional tasks. And their major emotional task is to integrate this excitement of exploring away from their caregiver with the feeling of safety that they get from their caregiver's ongoing presence. So in other words, thinking through, if I'm a toddler, because I feel so safe that my special grown-up is there for me, I know no matter what, they're right there with me. That means that I'm safe enough to go and explore on my own and learn that independence and try those things on my own. So toddlerhood is such a neat time for them because their brain is just exploding with neurons that are firing together. And they're learning all of these beautiful skills. And so we really think of toddlerhood as sort of this laboratory, this experimental stage for the challenges that they will face in adulthood. Of course, those challenges are not as sophisticated yet as when they become adults, but it's the starting point. So the launch pad for when they are learning these challenges, such as, well, for example, getting up when our alarm goes off, doing some of those non-choice tasks that might be hard for us, but we need to out of responsibility, or getting along with people who we work with that perhaps we don't enjoy, how to be respectful to authority, how to calm and control and manage our emotions so that we can accomplish tasks, as well as how can we focus and think ahead and plan. All of those abilities start and are being formed during toddlerhood. So again, just like Alicia Lieberman's quote, we're really thinking about this piece where it's so crucial that toddlers feel safe and protected in their relationship so they can also have this exhilarating thrust of carefree, unrestricted exploration. And a lot of times those can be in conflict with one another. And sometimes parents that I work with, will say like, I don't know what's going on with my kid because one minute they are so snuggly and they want to be right here on me. And then in the blink of an eye, for no reason I can see, they're pushing me away and they want to do their own thing. And it's like, for some parents, they'll say it feels like emotional whiplash at times. I'm curious if that's ever happened to any of you parents. Just go ahead in the chat box, give me like a yes or a no if you experience that same sense of this push-pull with your toddler. Sometimes they want to do it all on their own, And sometimes they really need their special grown up, and it doesn't often make sense which happens at what time.
I've got a yes sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he wants to do it on his own. Then when he cannot, he cries and wants to be held.
Yes. Yeah, I love that last comment. I think that can be so key, not necessarily standard. Each toddler is so unique with their own personality, and that piece about, I want to do it on my own. And then if it's too hard or big or challenging, I get really upset because I thought I could do it on my own, but maybe I can't yet. And then I need lots of that comfort. I think a great picture, if you can imagine, a young toddler who's still learning to walk, but they want to do it by themselves. They don't want to hold anyone's hand. And so as they're doing it, they're kind of like wobbling and trying to go, and inevitably they're going to fall down, right? So experiencing that challenge, and for us as the parent to be able to watch them and let them explore, and then be there if they need us, right? If they start crying because they hurt or because their feelings got hurt, how to celebrate, you're doing it, you're trying so hard, and I'm right here for you. So toddlers really are always trying to make sense of their world. They reach their own conclusions about relationships between cause and effect. So I tell this story. I was working with a family, and there was a toddler who was, I think his age was, he was like 2.5 or so. And he was like speaking pretty well. So one day he woke up and his eye was really red. And his mom noticed it and said, "Oh my goodness, your eye is so red." And in her mind, she thought, like, "Oh my gosh, long story short, he went to the doctor and he had pink eye. And so he got like those eye drops. But in his mind, what he told his mom was, "I wore a red shirt yesterday and I ate strawberries, and now my eye is red," which was completely different, right? Than like this very clear medical thing. "Oh, you have pink eye. That's why your eye is so red." In his mind, "I wore red, so now my eye is red. I ate something red, so now my eye is red. Of course, this makes sense." And of course, as the parent gave these eye drops over the next few days, the pink eye cleared away and his eye went back to its normal color. And the mom had shared with her son, "Oh, look, your eye is better. It's not red anymore." And he said, "I'm not eating red things." Again, I must have fixed my own problem. So simple. So sometimes with our toddler brains, right, we know that they are still in that prime stage of development. And so they don't have that same emotional sophistication or logical conclusion making ability that our brains do as adults. And so that's when we get to see some of this really fun, imaginative conclusions. And we can have that flip side where it can be really frustrating also, that some of their conclusions are so illogical, right? My kid was crying at me because I didn't let them hold the right stick at the park. Or I couldn't eat out of the dog food bowl, and now they're having this huge tantrum. There are so many things that maybe don't make a lot of sense about their behavior, and they're really just trying to make sense of it. So toddlers also have their own ideas about the magnitude and the limitations of their own power and their parents' power, right? That feels kind of like that push and pull where toddlers think that they are like grown-ups at times, right? I can do it myself. I can get dressed myself. I can decide I can do this on my own, because they don't realize their limitations. And the same thing with their parents' power. If they're maybe jumping off of something that's really high up, or without warning, they say, "Catch me." And they just like expect you to know exactly what they're doing and anticipate their every need. They just don't know. They might also see like superheroes, for example, and think like, "Oh, that must be like my parents. They must be able to fly too." Again, because whatever they're seeing, their brain is just trying to organize and make sense of. And so with that, they develop these really unique theories about what is real and what is pretend, which also includes what is safe and what is scary, what is alive and what is inanimate. And so with this age, just where their brain is in development, if they're watching a TV show, their brains don't know that what they're watching is only pretend. And so when they're seeing something happen on that screen, for a toddler's brain, they're making sense that, oh, this must be a real thing I'm watching, regardless of if it's a cartoon or, like live action. So that can be a great opportunity for us as parents to be reminding them, oh, this is pretend. These people are pretending these things. And it can be a really sweet opportunity to teach them those differences. I remember my nephew when he was little, he's now 10, which is wild to me. But when he was at this toddler age, Sid the Science Kid was a really popular TV show on PBS, and he watched it all the time. And if you're not familiar, it's like this boy named Sid, and he's like a cute puppet, and they do all these fun like science experiments, and they sing these very cute songs, and they talk about like biology and like gardening and everything related to science, of course. And there's an episode where they talk about bones in our body and how bones are funny and not scary. And so they even show skeletons. And so they're singing a song about how skeletons are silly, not scary. And so this toddler, my nephew, could then watch shows or cartoons that had skeletons, like The Nightmare Before Christmas, which his parents love, and he would laugh at it the whole time because skeletons are silly, not scary. And that's what So the Science Kid taught me. But then on the flip side, he could not watch Finding Nemo because that diver scene from the boat was way too scary for him. And in his mind, he thought the diver's coming for me. So things that don't necessarily make sense to my brain, because I would think, oh, I'm just watching a cartoon with a diver, that's fine, versus, oh, this other show might be a little creepy or scary. To the toddler, they're picking up clues from what they've heard in other places. And their brain is just trying to organize, oh, this must be silly, versus, oh my gosh, this is so scary. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to us. And for them, it doesn't always make a ton of sense either. They're trying to figure it out. All right, so one of the important emotional parts when we think about toddlers, and really any age child, is this idea of attachment. So in the chat box, will you all just write down, what does attachment mean to you? When you think of that word with a parent and a child, what comes to mind? What does attachment mean to you?
We'll just give them a couple minutes to keep thinking and typing.
Beautiful. Yeah, take a minute. I used to be a high school teacher, so I learned to be very comfortable with silence while people are having time to think and respond. So keep thinking, keep typing.
How the child sees a parent in relationship to themselves and how they are separate. We have connection, trust, feeling of safety, and consistency.
Beautiful. Oh, parents, that's so lovely. These are really, really wonderful thoughts, and all of them go inside of attachment. Absolutely. So, just like someone wrote about the sense of trust, I believe, and that who am I and who is my parent and what is our relationship, we really think about attachment as providing a secure base for your child. So that inner balance, like our toddler task, you may hear my puppies right now, so I apologize. I think a neighbor just popped over. So this is real life, right? But just like the toddler task, they want to balance that inner conflict. Who am I? Who is my caregiver? Can I explore? And when I come back, will my caregiver be there for me? And so from the time they're born, parents get to do this really beautiful task to help bring that base and make it really secure. So you're going to help your child sort out when to explore and when to stay close, right? When can I go out on my own and when do I need to come back in for safety? So as children grow and as they age and develop, then they get to develop this inner trust in the possibility of feeling safe and protected while becoming outgoing, confident. And so it starts to blend together in these really beautiful ways when they have that secure base. So we say that attachment, that a secure base of attachment is really created when a child has a need. We think of it as a cycle. So a child has a need and they let us know the need. So if I'm thinking back to a baby, right, like a newborn, if they have a need, it might be that they're hungry. And they let us know the only way they can, which is with crying. And so as a parent, when I can respond to my hungry baby and meet that need, right, I'm going to feed them. And while I'm feeding them, maybe I'm also looking at them. And so I'm really connecting in so many ways. I'm meeting that need and I'm also communicating with my body language. Maybe I'm rocking with them. Maybe I'm looking at them. I'm telling them, I am right here. And when you have a need, little baby, I will meet that need. And so as we do this over and over and over again, it helps their brain to form those beautiful connections that give us the secure base. I put down here attunement equals 30%. So there's been tons of research over the last 50, 60 years now about this idea of secure attachment and that it comes from an attuned caregiver, right? We can't meet someone's needs unless we recognize that they have a need. That's being attuned to them, right? So as you're attuned to your child's cues, when they're crying, do you know what they're crying about? Maybe they're hungry or tired or frustrated or they got hurt. You as the parent being attuned to them, you're able to sort that out. Now, it doesn't mean we have to do that all the time. So the research tells us that if a caregiver is attuned to their child 30% of the time, the studies over the last 6 decades prove that that child will have a secure enough base so they can grow up and be well enough adjusted in society so that they can focus, explore, develop meaningful friendships, have those self-regulation skills that we want them to have. Just with 30%, that means basically 1 in 3 chances to be attuned to our child. For me, that feels like a huge relief. I think it's easy to feel a lot of pressure or to get it from other sources about being these perfect parents, right? Who are always there for our kids and who never mess up. And we all know that's impossible. We are human and we all have our own stressors. I mean, we're living in a pandemic that is its own stressor, let alone how that maybe working from home or maybe our jobs have been impacted, maybe our hours have been reduced. There are lots of things that impact our stress levels right now in the world, let alone parenting a toddler who at times I'm sure can be so loving and snuggly and other times can be so precocious. I saw one parent had said that their child was busy. That was the word to describe. Toddlers are often trying to make sense. And so they are often exploring and running and moving. And that's a lot of energy to keep up with, even if we weren't exhausted. That's a lot. If only I had the energy of a 2-year-old. I think about all the things that I could get done. But one thing I have in common with 2-year-olds is that I just want to take naps all the time. Although maybe a toddler doesn't want to take a nap, maybe more like an infant. So hold that in mind 30% of the time to help bring in this secure base with your child, to help their bodies and brains understand and learn how to go out and explore and come back.
Joy, we had a comment.
Great.
It says, yes, thanks. I sometimes don't know if he's hungry or just pissed because he's done eating and doesn't want to be in his high chair.
What a great comment, and so important, right? As you're kind of figuring out their flavor. What is it? Do we have like a really big appetite, or come on, I finished eating, now let me get down and play? And I wonder too if it feels inconsistent, right? Like, well, I gave you more food, but now you're not eating it. Okay, well, I let you down, but now you want up again. The confusion of the toddler brain. I think for us, it might be frustrating. Like, what do you want? And if we can take that step back and go, oh, do you know what you want? Because sometimes that answer is just no. I need something, but I'm not sure what. And so it can be that like trial and error at times. And with this idea, the fact that you are trying still builds that secure base because you're being attuned. Okay, well, this strategy didn't work. Let me try this one. Okay, I'm right here with you. That one didn't work. Let's go to this one. Yeah, it's not always about that successful strategy to build a security. It's about, am I paying attention to my toddler? And am I doing the best I can? Okay, so I wanted to touch really fast on parenting styles. And in lots of different parenting worlds, there are basically 4 different kinds of parenting styles, and maybe some like blendings of each. So if we're looking at this grid, parenting styles, we want to include structure and nurture. And so sometimes our style can be really high structure or high nurture, or low structure or low nurture, or a combination of both. So let's kind of explore this. Okay, oh, I apologize. This formatting went a little weird. You'll forgive me though. We have this first style, which is called the authoritarian style. So on this grid, that means that there's a lot of structure in place and maybe not as much nurture. If you think about like a movie, so this is Brave, and this is Merida's mom. I think that this is a really good example of the authoritarian parent. So lots of structure, lots of expectations, lots of routines and rules, and here's how things should be, and not always a lot of nurture. So if you're familiar with the film, then you'll know that Merida's mom has very big plans for her, and there's a lot of duty and a lot of expectation, and Merida continually kind of fights against it and has lots of questions. And so for a while, she and mom are kind of butting heads about this. This is more of that authoritarian style where our feelings aren't really taken into consideration, more of just do as I say, and that's it. If I'm moving this way, my next style would be the neglectful parent. So this is a parent who has low structure and low nurture. I don't see this style very often, to be honest with you. This is more of, if you're familiar with the old movie Matilda, right? So Danny DeVito and Rita's characters, where these are parents who are really just in their own world. And so they do their own thing and they leave their child to their own devices. So we don't have a lot of structure in place, but then there also isn't a lot of nurturing happening, where it's sort of just where he says in the film, like, I'm big, you're little, I'm smart, you're dumb. This sense of a child is just this like dumb thing until they get older. That's in the movie. Now, in real life with parents that I've worked with, this kind of parenting style maybe happens because the parent is undergoing extreme stress, or they have a lot of their own things going on. Sometimes we see it with maybe the loss of a spouse and just how it impacts the parent's ability and capacity to show up for the child. Sometimes right now, it may feel like that way because we're in this very weird, like global crisis time. And so our systems just get overwhelmed. And while we may be working on these other areas, sometimes our body or brain just goes, I'm exhausted. I cannot implement my routine today. I do not care if my kids are following the rules. I just can't deal with it. Or we might also be so exhausted, like, please, kiddo, just go play by yourself because I'm so overwhelmed that I can't have people around me, even if you have this big need. So even as you're hearing this, give yourself some kindness if it sounds familiar or if you know people that are maybe struggling in this place, because these are also not fixed parenting styles. We often move to one or the other, depending on where we are in our stress levels. My next parenting style is called the permissive. So this is a parent who has lots of nurture, but maybe lacks that structure. I think a good example would be the mom from Mean Girls, right? This here says, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. And if you're familiar with the movie, she has a teenage daughter, but she talks to her like they're best friends, like she's also a teenager. She has no rules or curfew. She says, oh, go do whatever you want, spend however much money, buy anything you want. I love you. We're best friends. And of course, in the film, her daughter, you can see the way that she responds, where she takes advantage of that, but doesn't really have a lot of respect for her mom. And she doesn't see her as a friend, but she also doesn't see her as an authority figure. And so if I'm thinking back to that task of toddlerhood, a toddler needs to know that their grown-up is right there for them and provides that structure and sense of safety so that when things happen, they can go back. So it's not just about being so nurturing. We also need to put that structure in place so our child knows what are the limits. If I let a toddler do whatever they wanted, that's when they could get really hurt. And if I just let it happen, what am I teaching them about how they can trust me to keep them safe? My last parenting style is the authoritative style. This is a parent who lives with high structure and high nurture. And so with a lot of parenting groups, this is kind of where we aim for, knowing that we might move at times to these other places because we're human, of course. But we want to live into this place. And I think a good example would be Mufasa in The Lion King. And the reason why, if we think about this story, Simba is allowed to go explore, but there are limits. right? There are boundaries. You can't go into these like shadow places and like this area is off limits. And if you remember in the story, he breaks that rule and goes into the place where the hyenas are after him. And so he breaks the rule that his dad set, but his dad comes to his rescue and fights that battle for him. And then they have the consequences. You deliberately disobeyed me, right? And his child, Simba, knows that when something happens, he can go to him because his dad will be there. And they also have, like those like really sweet conversations about the stars and like the whole thing. And so I think that's a sweet example of how you can be both nurturing, right? Like meeting your child's emotional needs and also implementing that structure. So boundaries and limits and consequences to breaking those limits are all very important. And we just want to find that dance in the middle. So I'd like you to take a minute right now, just think for a minute and write either onto your Zeetings on your smartphone or in the chat box, whichever is easiest for you. But think through, as you were a child growing up, what parenting style did you experience most? And I say most because, again, parents fluctuate depending on stress levels. But if you can think about who your primary caregiver was, how would you describe their parenting style for the most part? Take a minute and think about it and then type it in.
Have authoritative, maybe a little authoritarian, little bit of both.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, I'll share with my primary caregiver, I had a lot of maybe like more leaning toward permissive. So there was some structure, but not a lot when I think about how much nurture there was. But then when my caregiver would become stressed, and that could look like lots of things. So if I broke a rule that I didn't know was a rule, so for example, we had this carpet in our throughout our house, and we didn't have any like rules in place about where you should eat or drink. And one day I was carrying a cup of red Kool-Aid from the kitchen to a different room. And wouldn't you know it, I spilled the red Kool-Aid all over our light carpets. And that, then there became like a really distinct pink stain there for a very long time until it got replaced. And so my more so permissive parent in that moment of like intense stress suddenly shifted over and became authoritative. And suddenly there were lots and lots of rules in place, as well as how could you do that? How could you be so irresponsible? How could we, what are people going to think? Blah, blah, blah. And so there was this swinging from permissive to authoritative. We didn't have a lot of rules, and now we have lots of rules. I'm curious if anyone else had a similar experience. So I bring up this activity as we reflect on how we were parented, because now we are parents. And so it can be really important to think about how our parents responded to us during different tasks or different behaviors, or when we had different outbursts or tantrums or frustrations, and think through what that taught us, what lesson that taught us, right? And so that way we can find the places where we want to be. So what lesson do I really want to teach my child through this? And when I respond to them, am I just reacting out of frustration or anger or impatience? Am I doing something for them because it's faster and easier instead of letting them explore? We want to really think through, what am I trying to teach them? So once again, my toddler whisperer, Alicia Lieberman, says the partnership between parent and child by necessity has to remain unequal for a long time. So when we think about this, we want to remember that as parents, we are the grown-up. We are the authority in charge. And our toddlers like to think that they're in charge. They like to think that they're the boss. And we can partner, we can compromise, right, at times, which we'll get to in a little bit, about how to make some of those compromises and give choices. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who decided what choices were appropriate, because I am the grown-up, I am the authority. And so if you can remember these words, that your toddler needs you to be the person who is bigger, who is stronger, who is wiser, who is the one that can let them go out and also tell them when to come back in. If we let toddlers act like adults, then they won't learn how to act like appropriate adults. So there are a couple of videos that I was hoping to share with you, but this platform doesn't allow that because of the sound situation. So they are linked in the chat box. And I just invite you to look at those on your own time. They're just like maybe 2 minutes long, 2 or 3 minutes long each. But they really talk about, for a toddler, like, why am I feeling so many feelings? And why do I explode so much? And I think they're done in really lovely ways. And then the second video is about building our executive functioning skills, which for a toddler, that's where we really start. And then we have the chance to continue to build on those skills the rest of our lives. When we start at this toddler age, it can be so crucial because some of those skills are about impulse control and thinking ahead about how our choices may have consequences and what those consequences might be. An executive functioning skill is about mental flexibility. So if I'm focused on something and I have to switch tasks, can I do that successfully, right? So can I transition without having these huge meltdowns? For a toddler, that answer is, I might be learning these things, but they are all going to be very challenging. The idea of sharing and taking turns is a part of executive functioning. And right now, it's just starting out. And so it's very challenging. So if you have, let's say, a play date, or your child is playing with an older sibling, and you're asking your toddler to share their toy with them, it's important to learn how to share. And as parents, keep in mind, this will be very difficult. And so we can expect a lot of pushback and a lot of no. And if we force them to share, maybe a lot of those tears and tantrums. So we can think through other ways, which I think we'll talk about in just a second. So as we're supporting our toddler's development, we want to remember that routines matter. So our young children need consistency, they need predictability. So really, you want to create a consistent expectation for the child to master. Whatever that expectation is, as you're thinking about a behavioral need, we want it to be consistent and stick to just one at a time and then build on it. When we think about routine, we also think that providing that external structure, right? So if it's like a bedtime routine, for example, we brush our teeth, we go potty, we put on pajamas and we get in bed, right? And then maybe you have another thing that you do in bed, like a whole ritual. But if I do this consistently, that provides this external structure. And eventually that starts to click again in their brain how to have internal structure. So then as we see them getting ready for school, they're able to organize and accomplish those like homework tasks, for example, how to organize what's required of them. When we have routines in place, that kind of structure can really reduce a power struggle and reduce that defiance, right? No, I don't want to do this. Oh, I hear that you want to do it. And look at what time it is. It's time to get ready for bed. That's what we do every night. We eat dinner, we put our dishes in the sink. Maybe if there's time, like you play a game, and now it's time. That's our schedule. And if it's consistent, then they know what to expect. Routines also help with developing that independence and responsibility. Again, I think it's such a fun thing when you have a routine in place and you reference it a lot, and then one day you just don't have to reference it because it's clicked in with your child and they know what comes next. We see this a lot in preschool and childcare centers if they have those visual schedules, right? So after we have our playtime, then we have cleanup time, then it's time to go outside and line up. And it's so sweet to see the young children who maybe struggle with that at first eventually come to get it. So, oh, I heard the cleanup song. Now I'm going to put my blocks away. And now I'm going to go stand on my square to go outside. So we want to think about parenting strategies with our toddlers as kind of twofold. So proactive, things to do beforehand, and then responsive, things to do after. And I say before and after in whatever that behavior is that's going on. So proactive strategies, we want to think about giving our toddler choices. Like we've said tonight, toddlers really want to be in charge. And it's very hard being so little when you don't have a lot of choices. Most toddlers are told when to wake up, what to wear, what to eat, when we're going places, and where we're going. And none of that's really their choice. So can you give your toddler choices in those little things, right? Can we give them two choices? Do you want to wear the green shirt or the yellow shirt? And let it be their choice. Great, you chose yellow, right? If we're playing a game together, do you want to play for 2 more minutes or 5 more minutes? Oh, you chose 5 more minutes. We're going to play for 5 more minutes and I'll set my timer. And when that 5 minutes is done, then it's time to clean up. And we decided this together because I gave them a choice. And it's still okay with me because I came up with it. With that, it's kind of like you're giving these compromises, right? Like what are I think of it as what are the negotiables and what are my non-negotiables? So for me with children, a non-negotiable is safety, right? If we're going outside, you have to hold my hand when we cross the street. That is a non-negotiable. I need you to sleep at night. That is a non-negotiable. How many books we read before we go to sleep, that is negotiable. So that can be a compromise, right? Oh, do you want to read 1 book or 3 books? You want to read 17 books? Okay, we can read 1 book or 3 books, right? And I'm going to repeat it. I'm not going to shut down like 17 books. Are you kidding me? Even though I might be thinking it. Wow, you want to read 17 books? We could read 3 tonight. Do you want to read 3 books or 1 book? Oh, great. Thank you. 3 books. Thanks so much. When I do that, it's like I'm sharing power with them. I'm boosting their choices and I'm boosting that so they feel a little bit more equal. This helps avoid those power struggles where then I end up giving in and then feeling terrible. Because if it comes to a power struggle with a toddler, they will always win. They have way more endurance and way more stamina than we do. So I also want to think about what terms do I use that are valuable for my family, my culture, the flavor of how I run the household, right? For some families, they want their children to use respectful words, or they might say like, use your kind words or your gentle words. For some families, they want to make sure that children are asking instead of telling them. And so as you're thinking about these life values that are examples, think through what are words that you use in your house. With my young ones, when I'm and also when I'm helping families or different centers, a word I use a lot is like safety things. And so for us, like non-negotiables, we keep ourselves safe, we keep our friends safe, we keep our things safe. And that also includes like our feelings. We keep our friends' bodies safe and we keep our friends' feelings safe. And so if they're saying mean words or they're using like things that are trying to hurt people's feelings, then that's not keeping our feelings safe. And so that's the kind of language that I use, but you have your own language. So just think through, how can I make these consistent words in our home so that I can reference it? Oh, are those your kind words? Are those your gentle hands? Show me how you play gently with the puppy. Show me your kind words. Say yes, please, whatever it is for you. These strategies are based on a parenting program called trust-based relational intervention. You may have heard of it or you may not, but it's this really lovely evidence-based class offered for parents that gives some really sweet strategies for kiddos of all ages. Okay, so when we're thinking about our kiddo and maybe they had a meltdown or a tantrum, or they simply just didn't do what we asked them to, then we become reactive. We're going to have a response after the fact. And so if you can remember the acronym IDEAL, the way that we want to deal with our child is going to be immediate, right? So we want to go to them right away. We want to be direct with them. So I'm not going to be distracted and doing other things. I'm not going to call out to them from across the house or across the room. I want to go to them right away, physically go to them, which will help this be efficient, right? I want to speak about exactly what just happened. And I want to make sure that I am action-based and not like theory-based. Oh, how could you have done this thing? What were you thinking? Anytime we ask a child, what were you thinking or why did you do that? Most likely they're going to look at us like, I don't know, right? Especially for our toddlers, their brain is trying to make sense of lots of things. And sometimes it gets overwhelmed with feelings and they just respond. And our toddlers don't quite have that sophisticated language yet to explain to us what happened. Hey, you know what, Mom? I got really frustrated because I'm hungry and I'm thirsty, and big sibling just took the toy that I was playing with. I mean, as adults, like it might be hard for us to have that language too. So we're thinking through, oh, what could I do instead? And I want to make sure that I'm leveled at the behavior and not the child. I'm talking about what happened and not who they are. So we're thinking through what are some common stressors that you may experience as a caregiver. And I know that I've touched on them already, but you don't have to share. You can just be thinking through what are the stressors that you experience every day that maybe impact your ability to be thinking about their social skills, their emotional needs, right? Having that patience to enjoy them and let them come out and come back in. And we also want to consider that there are lots of expectations in our society from lots of people around us who are probably very well-meaning and can send us specific messages about how we are supposed to parent and what our kids are supposed to act like or be like, and how that reflects on us as parents. So we are getting lots and lots of messages about it. And I want to invite you to think through, my unique child is working on accomplishing some very important tasks right now. And that is going to look very messy. And that's a beautiful thing. And can I allow that to happen while pushing away this pressure to have those perfect kids who are meeting every milestone exactly when they're supposed to be? We have just like a little bit of time left. So on the Zeetings or in the chat, if you want, will you just select what are some of these barriers that you have? My own stress, it's hard to be patient. I have other children that need support sometimes at the same time. My own energy levels, this is not how I was raised. I'm just exhausted, or something else. If you're typing in the chat box, just go ahead and type the letter of the options. And if you're using Zeetings, you can just go ahead and select these.
I have a B.
Great, it's hard to be patient. While people are answering that, Susan, remind me, we get to go until 6:45?
Correct.
Beautiful, we're crushing it. Any other barriers that you experience? And if it's other, if it wasn't listed, maybe if you feel brave enough, you could share that in the chat box. We'll give like 30 more seconds or so.
Have other co-parenting.
Ah, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Co-parenting can be tricky because you have your own values and routines and structure in your home. And then kiddo goes to other parents' home where they have their own culture, their own structure and values, rules and routines, and how that looks.
We have and F.
And I'm exhausted. Yes. Yeah. Trying to implement that structure or that consistency when your energy levels are just really low is so challenging. Any other barriers? Okay, so we really want to think about supporting yourself as the parent. Any barrier that you might experience at any given time in the day to being present and supporting your toddler's sometimes sporadic, sometimes chaotic needs, it really starts with you and what your capacity is, right? If you think of your bank account and you have to make a withdrawal, it's really hard to make a withdrawal when the funds aren't there. And then you're going into a deficit. So if we think of our energy levels and our emotional bank accounts, it's really hard to do those present things that support your child's development as well as their social needs and their emotional needs if that bank account is empty. And so there are some really lovely ways that you can have that account refilled, right? So we want to make sure that you're putting deposits in your own bank account before you have to make withdrawals to be with your child. And so there are lots of ideas, right, about self-care. And I think that we've heard about self-care for a very long time. I like to think of it as self-compassion. And I like to think of it as what are things that are refreshing for me, that are life-giving, and that fill up my bank account. So there could be lots of physical activities. Maybe for some parents, it could be like physical activity or exercise, or having some downtime to yourself and being able to read in privacy and not be interrupted. Maybe it's talking on the phone to a friend or like FaceTiming with a friend to have that recharge. Whatever it is, I'm sure you hopefully are thinking about what helps refuel you. right? Maybe connecting with other parents or having time with your family in like maybe having play dates or game nights or dance parties, lots of ideas. I also want to think about how we view ourselves as parents, right? So like what's my internal narrative? What am I saying to myself? And if you remember back at the beginning, I talked about if we have 30% of attunement to our child, 30%, then the studies show that our kids are going to turn out like basically okay, right? Like well adjusted, able to communicate and get along with others. And at 30%, if I were in school, that's not even a passing grade. But in life, it's more than passing. And so I really want to think about this mantra of being good enough. It's already exhausting being a parent, and we are human. So there will be times when you just miss your kid, when they are doing something and they're demanding your time and attention, and you just don't have it in you. You don't have the energy, or maybe you don't have the patience. And so out of your exhaustion, out of your frustration, you snap at them. And maybe you yell at them and you say things that you wish you hadn't said to them. That happens. And can you go back to them and repair it? Right? And say, oh, I was frustrated and I should not have yelled at you. I'm sorry. The studies show that when we make that kind of repair in the relationship with the child, that it does more good for their brain development than if we had never messed up in the first place. So we think of that as a rupture and repair, right? And we can expect as imperfect humans that we will have lots and lots of ruptures. Even our toddlers, they will also create ruptures, right? I want to do this by myself. Oh, and now I got hurt and now I'm crying. That is a rupture, right? Like a disruption. And as the parent, we get to help repair that. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you fell. I'm so sad you hurt yourself. Here, let me hold you, right? That helps repair that. I don't necessarily need to be like, see, this is why you have to listen to me. I told you you couldn't do that. Sometimes I want to feel like saying that because I'm exhausted. And well, if you had just listened to me the first time, this would not have happened. But when my child, when a toddler is emotional and upset, it's not going to do a lot of good if I rub it in their face with an I told you so. That doesn't help repair. That might increase the rupture. What I want to do first is validate and soothe and comfort, right? Go to that nurture side. Oh, you got hurt here. I'm right here. And then when they calm down, we can talk about, oh, that wasn't safe. I'm so sorry. Let's try and keep you safe, right? This is why I asked you to walk or whatever it is. So there's a rupture and there's a repair, and all of that goes to being a good enough parent. We are not in the business of being perfect parents. All we need to do is be good enough. And where you are doing the best you can, and that is good enough parenting.
Joy, we had a comment that said talking about feelings is huge in our house. Tantrums from kids or adults are talked about.
I love that. And I love that you said tantrums for adults also. Again, I'm thinking through what are we teaching our children? And you are their strongest teachers, right? We model how they are going to interact and what they believe about things. So being willing to talk about your feelings openly with your kiddo, oh my goodness, that just gives them so much permission that we don't have good feelings or bad feelings. We just have feelings. And when we have tantrums, we can talk about that too, because parents have modeled it. Thanks for that comment. So I put this in, no grudges against our child. When our toddler, or any age child, let's be honest, responds to us in ways that we don't really want, it can feel really personal at times, right? And our toddlers do not really know. They don't really understand, and they certainly don't really care about how hard we work to take care of them. Don't you know what I do and how hard I work all day and the stress I feel to make sure that your tummies are full and that you have the clothes that you need and that a roof over your head? Kiddos don't really care that much about that. Don't you care that I was pregnant with you for 9 months and it was terrible or wonderful? Kiddos don't really get that because toddlers still at this age see the world as revolving around them. And that's appropriate for this age because up until now, it has had to revolve around them for their survival. So now they're entering this stage where they're learning about things outside of themselves, and that creates its own conflict. But kiddos start to say those words like, I hate you, when you put up a limit. They like to say no a lot. I was talking to a parent the other day, and their toddler has learned the words, you're a bad mommy. And coming from a little one, well, anyone, but especially a little one that is your child, those words can really sting. And so as a parent, remind yourself that you are the grown-up, you are the authority, and they are trying to respond the ways that they know or think might make sense. So when they're saying these hurtful words, what are they actually trying to communicate? Do they actually hate you? No. Do they know what that means? Probably not. Have they heard it before? And are they trying to use the emotions to convey that they really don't like this from like what's going on? Yes. But again, remind yourself, they're only 2, they're only 18 months, they're only whatever age. And that way we don't hold those grudges. We don't keep it personal against them. Also remind yourself as a parent that you can make your own change. So whatever that looks like, if something is going on that you're not satisfied with in your relationship with your child, that you are capable of making that change. Again, your child is not the boss of the house. You get to be the boss. And it might be challenging to implement a new strategy, right? If we haven't had a morning routine and suddenly I'm starting a morning routine, it's going to be hard to adjust. And can I expect it? And remind myself, this is going to help. This is going to help my family, right? Can I make that change? And of course, just like those self-compassion refueling strategies, sorry if you can hear my puppies, you want to put your oxygen mask on first, just like those airplane tutorials. Again, if I think about my bank account, if I'm on empty, I can't make a withdrawal. I can't go into that emotional deficit to then support my kiddos or my partner or my spouse or my friends. I need to have something in my bank account so I can then support my kiddo who needs that help. And so really, I want to invite you to think through, what does that look like for you? Sometimes with families, it can look like, oh, okay, so my bank account is empty and I need to refill it because my kiddos are right here. Can we do like a game night? Can we do something silly right now where we have a dance party in the kitchen? Can we have these moments of enjoyment that help refill me, that aren't necessarily like, man, I just need to go to a spa, because that might not be realistic or feasible. So thinking through what are those times as a parent with my children where I feel the most delight with them. And maybe when my bank account gets low, I can facilitate some of those moments of enjoyment. Okay, we're all gonna color. We're all gonna scribble scrabble on the papers and just laugh and talk about the things that we created. And those moments can help put some deposits back into my bank accounts. I think a lot about this idea of regulation. So toddlers can get dysregulated very easily because their emotions are so big. And breath is one of the strongest ways to help calm our whole system. So if our heart is beating fast, like I'll give the example, maybe you heard my puppies barking outside just now because our doorbell rang. And as I'm talking, I'm just aware that you're probably hearing that as well. And so my heart started beating a little bit faster and my body got a little warm inside because I could feel that, oh, I'm getting just a little bit dysregulated. And so if I can just notice what's happening and then take a deep breath or a few if I need it, then my body doesn't feel quite so warm. It's going back to its regular temperature. I can notice that my heart is going back to its regular heartbeats and not so fast. So as a parent, can we be aware of what's going on, right? When my toddler is having that huge tantrum, how is it getting into my body? What's happening inside of my body also? And can I take some deep breaths to make sure that I stay here, that I stay present and not focused on this other stuff going on? That is regulation. And if I can do that for myself, then I'm better able to do it for my toddler in that co-regulation where I can breathe with them and be with them. And finally, when I think of what helps fill my bank, also instead of depleting it, are having my own boundaries. So things look very different now. If I was in pre-COVID time and I could see lots of friends, perhaps boundaries is saying no to a lot of those events. Or if there is another parent or a friend who can watch my child, to be able to set the boundary and say, I need some time to myself. I need a break. Or maybe a boundary with your children, even in your family, is thinking through, okay, so during the day, we need to have some quiet time because as a parent, I need quiet time for my own oxygen mask to refuel myself. And so here's going to be a boundary about what that quiet time looks like. Do I want kiddos to go play by themselves in their room? Do I want them to look at picture books or puzzles? How long should that quiet time be? Right? Thinking about the age, the younger they are, the less time it's going to need to be. But can we even set a timer for 10 minutes? And can I let that 10 minutes be really intentional where I take some space for myself? And we think of it as like giving ourselves a little brain break. Excuse me. So I want to leave you all with these slides. On the Zedings platform, if you're still on that website, you can keep all of these slides. You can just download them after I'm done sharing this. But there are lots of really beautiful resources that I can't speak highly enough of. So I'm actually going to work backwards a little bit. This is the book that I had mentioned, Alicia Lieberman's The Emotional Life of a Toddler. Also, if you enjoy reading, Dr. Dan Siegel, who does a ton of research with children and their neurobiology, he has two books that are really lovely and give such a big picture about what's going on inside of our brains, The Whole Brain Child, and then No Drama Discipline, in which he talks about how do we meet our child's needs while also setting limits, while also, when we need to, enforcing consequences. If you're looking at like specific milestone information, you can go to the CDC's website. I'm also going to shift over here. I apologize. But if you look at defcofamiliescolorado.org, this is a newer website that was created that has tons of resources and support for parenting and developmental milestones. It's essentially like a one-stop shop if you have questions about your kiddos age 0 to 5. And so there are tabs on there about what are the milestones, things about what if my kiddo isn't reaching these milestones. If you are curious about evaluations, developmental evaluations, there's information there too. We also have blog posts that have updated information with resources, even like at-home activities when we're in COVID and we can't play outside the way that we used to. So I recommend checking that site out as well. Also on the website is a search platform, and that links to this huge database throughout the county. So you can put in your zip code, and let's say that you're looking for childcare, and then you can click on it, and all the childcare services in your area, like near your zip code, will pop up. And so there's information about like food resources and housing and job opportunities and medical support for little kiddos, education, all kinds of things through that. Vroom and Bright by Text are both free resources for families of young children. Vroom, you like either of these places, you can go to the website and they have free apps that you can download, and you enter your child's birth date, and then they'll send you like tips or point you to different activities that you can do to really help build up those executive function skills and those social emotional abilities. And they're activities that you probably already do in your day-to-day tasks. So while we are brushing our teeth, we can also be doing this thing. Or one of the activities that I think Vroom has is if you take your child to the grocery store, you can give them a task. We're going to look for everything in the grocery store that has the rectangle shape, right? And it has a picture to show them. So it makes it a little bit more of a game, but we're also strengthening a lot of those important skills in their brain. The Adoption Exchange offers some more of these classes, like the trust-based relational classes. They also offer other online parenting support. Oopsie, sorry. And they have some really cool resources as well. So I enjoy them. And then, of course, finally, our Jefferson Center for Mental Health Early Childhood Family Services. If you are thinking, or you have, a friend or a neighbor who's talking about their children and maybe some of those behaviors or parenting pieces feel just a little bit outside of what feels like developmentally typical, give us a call. This is the main number for Jefferson Center, and you can just share what's going on. Maybe if a family or your family experienced something really intense, maybe like a traumatic event or just something really scary and big, and you want a little additional support helping your child understand and make sense of what happened, that's exactly what the team is for. So they can provide different kinds of therapy support. We also have parent educators. If you're like, I really want to start a routine and this feels really challenging and I just don't have capacity to do it alone, you don't have to do it alone. We can set you up with a parent educator who can currently see you over Zoom and talk through some of those different goals and then help you work toward those goals. And then, of course, I do want to mention that we have our crisis services, which are available 24/7. This is the number listed, and you can give a call if you are feeling in that crisis place, if you're having a mental health emergency.
Joy, we had a question. Do any of these services help with sleep training?
Oh, what a great question. So I think if you go to the Jeffco family site, there's some information about sleep training. What else I could direct you to is if you look at the Fussy Baby Network, and actually let me stop sharing this and I'll put that in the tab or in the chat box. Fussy Baby Network is actually a free service that comes out of CU Anschutz, out of like the university hospital. But you can like Google search that and look, and they'll have some more information. But they have people who meet with families who are struggling with sleeping and sleep schedules with their young ones. So that could be a great resource.
Well, thank you so much, Joy. We do have time for a couple questions. So if you'd like to put those in the chat, I will read those off to Joy.
Thank you. Yeah, anything that's lingering that you're still wondering about, go ahead and just take a minute.
I'll give you guys all just another minute to think before we wrap things up tonight. We had a comment that this was awesome. Thank you for making me feel not alone. That's really sweet. Yeah, you're not.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'll tell you, I think parenting is probably the hardest job anyone could have, and you all are living that. I think that there are additional challenges by being maybe separated from our regular routines or our people, and it can be a lot easier right now to feel isolated or like some of our challenges are just for us. So yeah, please know you are not alone. We are in this together.
We also have another comment. I struggle with guilt of working full time and feeling that restricts what I want to do as opposed to what I'm able to do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that comment. I wonder when you're working full time where kiddo is, if you don't mind sharing that in the chat. Like if they're in preschool or with another caregiver or in childcare.
Daycare.
Daycare, beautiful. So I think this really says a lot about like that social pressure, right, of how we're supposed to be as parents. If it's helpful at all, there's been some really sweet research since the 80s with more and more parents, like both parents or moms specifically, going to work full time. And that research tells us that the more consistent caring grown-ups in a child's life, the better. So it exposes them to help build their different like language and speech development, but it also gives them opportunity to experience other adults and other peers. And so with that guilt, maybe you can just be holding the benefits that your child is receiving with them going to a different place where they get to explore a different environment and experience other caregivers. And then you, because you are working full time, when you come and you're with your child, if it's the quality of interaction with them versus the quantity, right? So if you pick them up in your home and you have like mealtime before bedtime, maybe that shorter period, how can we make this like really sweet where we get those times of connection, right? And again, that 30% counts for that quality over quantity. Any final thoughts or questions?
We just got some thank yous, and I will piggyback on that. Looks like we're about out of time. Thank you again, Joy, and everyone for attending today. Don't forget to fill out the session evaluation link. Put that in the chat right now. And make sure to stop by the expo hall here at the virtual conference to learn more and connect with all of our community partners. No matter what you're facing in life, it's important to have the tools and resources that you and your family need to thrive. Jefferson Center is here for you. We are open, accepting new clients, and accessing care is easier than ever with virtual appointments. You can visit our website at jcmh.org or follow us on Facebook for more resources and information. You can also reach us by calling 303-425-0300. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.